My name's Renewable. I was a building engineering group director at Tariffs for a long time doing buildings, and about 25 years ago I was approached by a professor related to solar energy, and got involved deeply into solar energy as a result. I then moved to BP Solar, who were the largest in solar in the world at the time, and stayed with BP Solar and helped generate the UK market over the last over a period of about 7 years, and then closed down BP Solar as they decided to be an oil and gas company again, and set up as a consultant, giving advice to a number of people in the solar industry. Just thinking about the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff was a mechanism whereby it was there to provide a subsidy to solar in order to drive down the price of solar and increase the volume of solar in the market to get the price the equivalent of fossil fuel. Most countries, Germany led the way with the feed-in tariff, and now most countries have a feed-in tariff. UK were rather slow to come into it, but 2 years ago came out with the feed-in tariff at a time when the industry was growing from a cottage industry to mass scale, and prices started to drop dramatically, and caught out the feed-in tariff in the UK as a result. What happened is that when they came out with the feed-in tariff in UK in April 2010, it was set at a rather high level in order to stimulate what was a very small market at the time. The price though of solar at that point in time dropped dramatically, and hence they've had to try to follow that with the tariffs. And by April 2012 they'd cut the tariff by more than half, and everybody thought that was the end of the industry, it cut so quickly. But when you look at the actual installed price reductions, they've followed the same path. So the result is that the returns that you get with the feed-in tariff now, the incentive that is there, is exactly the same as what it was at the start. It's just the cost, the outlay, is significantly less. The government, in order to keep control of it, have come out with a capacity degression system, and depending on how much is installed during a 3-month period, dictates what sort of cuts in the tariff occur. And in this way they can always keep track of the growth in the market against the actual subsidy. And every 3 months they come out with a degression number. It's generally fairly small, something like 3.5%, so it's not a significant amount. Other things that have happened to the feed-in tariff as it's been fine-tuned over the last 2 years. Social housing now only gets 90% of the standard tariff. Again, if you do mass numbers, you can do it slightly cheaper, and that reflects that. The export tariff has been increased from what was 3 pence up to 4.5 pence. That's in line with the fact that the price of electricity is going up, and therefore you should get greater benefit from that. The tariff period, it used to be 25 years, it's been reduced to 20 years. It's still a long time. You still get paid back within 10 years, so it's still a good return at the end of the day. It's all linked to RPI, and both the generation tariffs and the export tariffs are linked to RPI. So once you've actually installed your system, it's going up every year without fail. The government are very keen on energy efficiency at this point in time, and thought it would be a good idea to link those investing in renewables to energy efficiency. So they've come out with a level D rating, which is achievable by more than 50% of the houses in any case without any work. But it encourages the other ones to put loft insulation in, wall insulation, efficient light bulbs, things like that. So that's another change which came in. I've mentioned the degression mechanism that comes in every 3 months. And it's likely though that at the moment the amount of volume being installed, or the capacity being installed, is not sufficient to change the tariff for probably in the next 6 months, probably over the winter anyway. So we'll see a pickup in the industry again in the spring. So the impact on the tariffs have been that yes, it started off at 43.3p. It seems a long time ago, back in April 2010, but Up until October it was 16 pence for this is for the domestic systems, and you can see on that chart how it varies depending on the size of the system. But the digression mechanism only cuts out, well, it reduces it to 15.44. It's hardly a change, and it's unlikely now, like I say, to change until well into next year. The larger scale projects, they are moving along as well. Some of the retailers are doing big rooftops, and local authorities doing some of their libraries and civic buildings and things like that. And so that side sort of is motoring along in the same way. The large scale though has come to a grinding halt. The 7.1p that they came out with was a severe drop, and it's meant that no one's using the feed-in tariff for large scale projects. However, it now overlaps with the renewable obligation certificates, and you can get 2 ROCs for large scale, which is the equivalent of 8.1p. So why go for 7.1p with a feed-in tariff when you get 8.1p via the other mechanism, which is where everybody has moved across to at this point in time. But when you look at the roller coaster ride of the industry, it's been up and down like a yo-yo every time they were about to change tariffs. Everybody tries to beat the tariff change, and that's when the tariffs were changing from a large amount, from 40 plus pence down to 20 pence. But now it's steadied down, but it's starting to grow again. I think there's a lot of people have seen the reports in the press whereby the industry's dead, the tariffs have gone, etc. No, they haven't. They've just been reduced in line with prices of systems, and therefore it's a matter of educating the public that the market is still there, the subsidy is still there, you can still generate your own electricity and get a subsidy and still make a good return. So we're creeping up to something like 7 megawatt a week going in at the moment. We need to get to about 20 megawatt a week to be the sustainable industry that we expect. We don't want more peaks and troughs. That's no good for industry to plan around. In terms of the way that the department deck look at the costs of installed and assess what the returns are, they've done analysis and they came out with figures that have shown there the impact analysis of the pricing, and that was worked on their view of something like a 6 to 8% return. However, when you look at today's prices, already prices have fallen quicker than what the feed-in tariff have been adjusted, so the returns are actually significantly better. 9 to 11% is easily achievable, and some can achieve even greater amounts. Interesting though that the public seem to like solar, and a U-Switch survey recently gives some great feedback in terms of why were people doing it. You know, were they doing it just for the investment? Not really. They were doing it more to cut their energy bills. Energy bills are going up by roughly 10% per year, and therefore they can see those just going up forever more. If you have something which is generating at least 50% of your electricity, then you're going to reduce your bills in the future. And when you get a subsidy of 9–11%, that extra money that you get actually pays for the remainder of your energy bill. So in effect, by investing in solar, you're covering all your energy bills in the future. I think the other thing is that a lot of the public seem to like the fact that you don't see it, you don't hear it, it's not a wind turbine or whatever, and there's been lots of comments about that. You know, I think people want to be seen to be doing things, and like solar because it just sits there, generates electricity from light and doesn't have any moving parts, etc. And what I find is that most people, once they have a solar system, are telling their neighbours or their friends about it and how much it's generating and how much it's earning them. So it's a great technology, and everybody seems to like it. Like I say, electricity prices are going up roughly 10%. Well, it's just gone up by 10% in the last few weeks, and that's both for domestic and commercial customers. Commercial tend to do 3-year type intervals, so it depends when they next review their pricing. But you know, with people like Ofgem now predicting a shortage of energy in the UK by 2015, roughly the time of the next election, which is not good news for the parties at the moment, something's got to be done. You can't build capacity quickly. Nuclear takes 10 years to build a power station. What the government have realised is how quickly you can deploy solar, significantly quicker than any other energy generating technology. So it's got a great future in terms of deployment. I think the future prices, though, it'd be nice if government came out and said what they thought the future prices were. Unfortunately, government work on statistical data over the last 25 years, and it's only something like 2.6%. But where everyone knows their electricity bills have been going up by 10% per year for the last few years, and will continue to rise. The good news in terms of solar, we had a cottage industry in the UK. You know, up until 2010, when the feed-in tariff started, we only had something like 26 megawatt had been installed in the previous 15 years. We now have something like 1.5 gigawatt, that's 1,500 megawatt, is now deployed. And what we're now getting is the evidence of how it works in different parts of the country, etc. It's interesting that most people's systems are performing between 10 and 25% better than what they expected. Therefore, their returns are better and the amount of energy they're generating is better. So what we're hoping that government will do is use the claims that people are now putting in under the feed-in tariff to give the real evidence as to how the solar is working, and give the necessary figures whereby the finance markets can pick up on that and use the correct figures of solar. Unfortunately, like any industry that grows quick, we thought we had the microgeneration certification scheme that would protect the customers from the cowboys, but the cowboys always find a way. What you don't do with a solar system is you don't put it in places where you have shading, because even if you just shade one panel, it destroys the performance of the complete system. And here's a few classic cases of a satellite dish right in front of a panel, therefore it's shaded, therefore the performance of that system is probably about 20% of what the customer would have expected. The top right there again, great big tree and a telegraph pole right in front of the house, shading the system. No matter when the sun's out, it's been shaded, so again, the performance would be pretty poor. The bottom photographs again, chimney pots and dormers, you've got to be very careful. Any shading affects performance. So therefore, you know, it's up to the industry to make certain we drive the cowboys out and make certain we strengthen the MCS process to make certain that their customers are looked after correctly.